Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium. My name is Okwema Kwapuku, and I work with the Center for Employment Innovation here at the Coady Institute as a collective impact for inclusive youth employment intern. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you all here to today's panel. I'll be a moderator for today's panel. Our panel for this hour is on the theme of youth engagement. And we're so excited to have one panelist with us here today to speak about their work in this area. After a brief introduction, the panelists will have about 20 minutes to present their work, after which we'll end the panel off with a 20 to 30-minute Q&A session. At the top of your screen, you should see a Q&A button. Please feel free to submit a question using this function at any time throughout the panel, and we'll do our best to answer your questions when we get to that part of the panel. But before we go ahead to introduce our panelists, it is important for us to acknowledge that the Center for Employment Innovation and the Coady Institute operate on the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kma'ki, which holds a complex history of and continues to be impacted by exploitation, violence, and colonization. We acknowledge Mi'kmaq and Maliseet peoples as the original caretakers of this land and recognize the failure of colonial institutions and systems to maintain the treaties of peace and friendship that were intended to guide our presence here. We also acknowledge the historical presence and contributions of African Nova Scotians and persons of African descent, whose forced labor plays a significant role in the forming of the foundations of this province, and whose own relationships with the land have been complicated by the impacts of slavery and colonization. The labor of refugee and immigrant groups as well has been exploited towards the same end. Race and indigeneity have been used as tools to oppress and repress various communities across these lands. And the intentional and unintentional maintenance of otherness continues to cause harm and contribute to the grief and trauma of historically excluded groups. As an organization, we take responsibility for learning and seeking long-term transformation in our relationships with land and labor in our province. With that being said, let me introduce you to today's panelist. Our presenter for today is Hannah James, and her presentation is titled Maximizing Growth and Skill Development, the Role of Student Symposiums. Hannah has been working with the CEI as a Youth Engagement and Symposium intern. And in this role, she has been coordinating this very 2023 Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium, as well as supporting other CEI work. She's a recent grad from St. FX and will be starting a master's in public health in the fall. An abstract from Hannah's presentation is as follows. This presentation will discuss the role that student symposiums play in the skill development for students throughout summer internships. Symposiums allow students to showcase their research or other work to a wide audience, whilst also allowing them to develop important soft skills. This presentation will use the Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium as a case study to examine how symposiums support student interns and their skill development. Additionally, this presentation will provide employers with information that they need to organize and host similar events for their interns. I'm so excited to present to you all Hannah James. Over to you, Hannah.
Okay. Thanks, Akria, for that introduction. Today, I will be presenting my work from the summer entitled Maximizing Growth and Skill Development, the Role of Student Symposiums. And as Akria said, my name is Hannah, and I've been working as the Youth Engagement and Student Symposium intern with the CEI. Just a quick agenda for my presentation today. I'll start by giving some key terms and definitions that I think you will need to know throughout the presentation to help you fully understand the information that I'm providing. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the soft skill gap, which exists amongst young workers. Then talk about the contribution of Student Symposium to soft skill development for student interns. And then finally, talk about how you can integrate learning opportunities into a student symposium. So the first term that I would like to define is actually student symposium. And for my purposes and for this work, this is just referring to any event where a student intern is offered the opportunity to showcase their research or other work to an audience that's outside of their immediate organization. Uh, the event should also include some sort of learning opportunities, and that can include in-person training or potentially training videos. But the key point here is that it shouldn't just be a presentation to, say, supervisors or to a higher up in the organization. It should be open to a much wider audience. Student interns is referring to any young individual who is working for an organization on a temporary basis, and that can either be full-time or part-time while they are studying, whether that's in high school or post-secondary education. And then soft skills refers to a range of skills that broadly cover 3 categories, including interpersonal skills, personal qualities, and additional skills and attributes of an individual. So the first thing that I want to mention about these is that there is no consistent definition of what soft skills are in the definition in the literature. Every author and organization tends to provide slightly different definitions or understandings of this term. And so this is the reason I chose this fairly broad definition by Bernard Schultz, because it allows for you to discuss a wide range of skills and also considers the complexity of soft skills as well. So once again, when we look at soft skills and consider how they are relevant in the workplace, it makes it really difficult to determine exactly what the most important soft skills for people to have. When you look across different industries and fields, some soft skills might be more important than others. However, we can see some common patterns form. So skills such as professionalism, work ethic, communication, teamwork and collaboration skills, and critical thinking are often commonly discussed throughout different types of fields and industries. And for this reason, these are the skills that I'm going to be focusing on for this presentation and for the context of how student symposiums can help you develop these soft skills. So when you look at soft skills such as these, they enable people to not only interact with others in the workplace more effectively, but they can also help young people further their careers because they can act as a competitive edge in an increasingly competitive job market. And so for these reasons and many more, soft skills are an incredibly important thing for young workers to have. However, growing gaps between the expectations of employers regarding the soft skills young workers should have upon their graduation versus those that the individuals actually have are posing issues. Oftentimes, young workers are entering the workforce with a significant level of hard or technical skills, but they lack the soft skills discussed above. And so this has been coined the soft skills gap. And I'm going to take a few minutes to discuss what that is and how that applies to student symposiums. So the first thing that I wanted to highlight on this slide is the quote that's included. So it says, people are hired because of their hard skills, but people are fired because of their soft skills. And this was a quote that I found really impactful when doing my research because it really demonstrates how important soft skills can be, but also kind of provides an explanation as to why they're not focused on and sometimes excluded in the curriculum because they're not things that people inherently think of as being required to get a job. even though they are so important. And so this quote led me to continue doing research into the soft skills gap and the exclusion of soft skills from school curriculum. So right from high school all the way to post-secondary education has meant that a lot of young people are graduating with a lack of competence in these highly important skills. And so this is what results in the gap between the expectations that managers or employers have versus the reality of what young people are able to do and what skills they have. And this skills gap can also be exacerbated by the fact that a lot of managers or employers are extremely busy and may not have the time to teach young people these skills, or some may feel that it's not their place and that these are skills that young people should have and should be developing on their own. However, with a lack of opportunity to develop that, young people are at a risk of having hugely negative effects on their success and their place within the workplace, as well as potentially decreasing the success of the workplace in general. So when we look at the effects that a lack of soft skills can have on an individual's career and their advancement, we see that managers are much more likely to hire and then promote individuals that are highly competent in soft skills, such as communication and teamwork. And so with a lack of soft skills and potentially a lack of opportunity to develop them, young workers are in a place where they may not get the job. And if they do get the job, they may be having difficulties advancing their career and getting further up in an organization or having increasing income. Additionally, we can see that a lack of soft skills by several individuals or by a couple can lead to things like greater workplace conflict, decreased productivity, and even the loss of talent, specifically related to potential workplace conflict or people feeling that they're not getting along with others. And so that can really negatively impact the workplace and the organization, which demonstrates that the skills gap is not only relevant to individuals themselves and to the impacts that individuals can feel, but organizations can also experience negative impacts, and for this reason should help to try to develop these skills for young people. So how can we actually address the skills gap through student internships and through learning? So this soft skills gap really demonstrates the need for opportunities that let students develop these skills while during their education. And so it's important that they have these opportunities before they graduate, before they enter the workplace, to kind of prevent any of those difficulties associated with the lack of soft skills. Of course, soft skill development can continue after graduation, but I think the first kind of exposure and the first steps of development should really happen during education and through educational institutions. So internships are a really great way of helping students to develop soft skills as well as hard technical skills, because they offer an opportunity to develop skills in a real life situation. The interns are still working with an organization. They still have a job. It's not a made up scenario for a classroom, but they have less of a concern or fear of potentially being punished or fired for a mistake, because there is an understanding that they are a student, they're still learning, and they might need more guidance in this internship to really be successful. And I think as well, since learning is often a key part of internships, Managers and supervisors often are more willing to spend the time to work with students to develop these skills and to offer mentorship, because the understanding is, again, they are students and they do need support in doing this. Whereas if they were to do this in a permanent kind of full-time employment after school, managers might have the expectations like, I hired you to do your job. Why should I have to spend the time to develop these skills with you? And it's also important for specific learning opportunities to be integrated into student internships that help develop soft skills, such as student symposiums, where students are able to not only showcase their work, but can develop really important soft skills and work on those soft skills, such as oral and written communication, problem solving, and various other soft skills. So to really examine how student symposiums can help support the soft skill development amongst young workers and amongst students, I think it's easiest to kind of use the Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium as a case study. So within this Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium, there are two main roles that students can play. So they can be a presenter during a panel where they're just presenting their work and showcasing research and talking about what they've done. But they can also choose to be a moderator, which is an additional role where they are able to support other students through the presentation process. And so these two different roles offer students the opportunity to develop several soft skills and are really able to help them use their learning opportunities. So as a presenter, students are able to develop the following skills. The first being oral communication. So as presenters, students are able to start really developing oral communication and are able to continue working on oral communication because they're able to then disseminate information they've worked on and that they've researched through an oral presentation during the panel. And this is really important in helping them develop abilities to figure out, what do I need to talk about? What's the most important thing to include? And how to really take a lot of written work potentially and do it in a format of an oral presentation. They're also able to develop more confidence around presentations and public speaking, which can be really important in their success in doing this in the future. And it's a situation where there is less stress and potentially anxiety around presenting, because it is in a situation where they're not being judged or graded or potentially kind of like graded on, similar to a class presentation. They're also able to develop written communication skills. So presenters are encouraged to create a visual presentation that accompanies their oral presentation. And this offers an opportunity to really help develop their ability to create effective presentations, where they learn like what are the key aspects of a presentation to include. So things like having an agenda, defining terms, as well as knowing what's the appropriate amount of text to include. But it also lets them develop the skills that they need to be able to kind of take, again, a significant amount of work and research that was done over a period of 3 or 4 months potentially into a much smaller and shorter piece, which are conducive to, again, an oral presentation, which can be really important in the workplace if you're taking, again, a huge project or a potential proposal and trying to create a presentation that is done in a shorter period of time. And finally, students and presenters are given the opportunity to develop time management skills during a presentation. So all of the presentations are giving a time limit of 20 minutes. And this is something that we really stressed and said we need to keep within this time limit because it ensures our panel stays on time and ensures that everyone receives the appropriate amount of time to present. And by receiving this time limit and having to stick with it, students are able to develop their time management skills regarding presentations and learning how to stick to a script and picking what information they really need to talk about to provide audience members with a full understanding of their work versus what they can exclude without compromising the presentation and the audience's understanding, which is an important skill, again, if developing a presentation for work or for a proposal that you're giving to potentially managers or clients as well. As moderators, students are able to take on that additional role and to help support other students during their panels. And the opportunity to moderate offers students more chances to develop some additional skills, but also further develop the pre-mentioned skills of oral and written communication and time management. So the first kind of set of skills moderators are able to develop are facilitation skills. So as the moderator, students are responsible for introducing the panelists and the panel theme and title, but they're also responsible for running and coordinating that Q&A session, which follows the presentations. And so by having the opportunity to practice facilitating an event, which is again fairly short and is very much planned out for them, and they're given all the tools and information they need, students are able to start learning how to be a good facilitator and learning what that looks like and what they need to do. And they're able to then start developing the skills that they need to potentially facilitate other events or meetings in the future. Moderators are also able to really develop time management again. So the major role of moderators is to actually keep the panel on time. So the moderator is responsible for ensuring that not only do they keep their introductions and their aspects short, but that the presenters do not go over their 20-minute time limit. And so this allows them to start learning how to not only maintain their work in a time limit and keep their work on time, but also how to communicate with others in a respectful manner and in a way that makes sense regarding their time limits as well. And finally, they're able to develop active listening skills. So as the moderator, students are responsible for facilitating the Q&A session, where audience members are able to ask questions to panelists. In some situations of like low participation, moderators are also expected or can ask questions to panelists that can fill the space while audience members submit their questions. And to do this effectively, moderators really have to listen actively to the presentation and make notes of where a question could be potentially asked. And this allows them to practice active listening skills while also creating relevant questions based on information that they were just given, which can be important if, again, they are listening to a proposal or trying to respond to proposals in a business or professional setting. And the final thing that I wanted to talk about today in my presentation is how you're able to integrate specific learning opportunities into student symposiums. So by participating in student symposiums, students are able to develop soft skills kind of passively because of the things that they need to do to participate. So things like they need to present an oral presentation, so they have to develop those skills regardless of if there's a specific kind of skill development opportunity. They're doing that. just by participating. However, you can also integrate specific learning opportunities into a student symposium to really help skill development become more active. So as part of the participation in Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium, students are offered 2 opportunities for active skill development. So the first is for all presenters. This included being provided a video which outlines the process of planning and creating a good presentation. And so that is really intentional about helping them determine how you pick your purpose, how you can develop the content regarding that purpose. And it also provides them information on how to succeed in a presentation for the student symposium specifically, but really provides the building blocks to create any type of presentation. The second is a virtual training session for any students who are moderating a panel. So this session covered the basic roles of a moderator and how to complete them effectively. And this training discusses facilitation and how to actually facilitate well. And so students are able to then apply this knowledge to the symposium when they moderate their panel. But they are also able to then use those skills in the future if they need to moderate or facilitate again. And I wanted to note that these skills will take more practice to fully develop. This is not kind of the end of skill development for student interns, but by having the opportunities to learn kind of the theory behind soft skills and behind how to facilitate or how to create a presentation, students are given the foundation to start developing that. So to conclude my presentation, while the soft skills gap is increasing amongst young employees, opportunities to develop soft skills are becoming more important. And in order to really avoid any of the negative consequences, which can be associated with a lack of soft skills, development really has to begin during their education. And so student symposiums are one way that this can be done and are a really excellent opportunity to help students develop those skills. But they're also able to showcase all of the hard work that they are doing during their employment with an organization or doing an internship. So they offer kind of 2 really key things to student interns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you to our panelist, Hannah. That was a wonderful presentation. Your work is incredibly important. We'll now move into the Q&A session of this part of the panel. We'll have about 20 to 30 minutes to answer any questions you may have about Hannah and her work. So please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and I'll ask them in the order that they are received. Once again, if you have any questions or representation, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions, and I'll ask them in the order that they appear. So I already see a question for you, Hannah, and the question to you is, in your research and experience, has the soft skills gap always been present in new grads joining the workforce, or is it a newer trend? And a sub-question to that is, in what ways do you plan to continue to develop these skills beyond this symposium experience? So the first question is, in your experience in research and your own personal experience, has this soft skills gap always been present in the new grads joining the workforce, or is it a newer trend?
So I think in my research, it kind of said like the skills gap has always been present, especially with individuals graduating from university specifically, because university often focuses very much on learning how to research and learning specific information, but doesn't always offer opportunities to learn potential soft skills. But the skills gap has been increasing in recent years, and it's becoming more of an issue than it previously was. So I think there's definitely something happening that is making students not have these opportunities to develop soft skills as much. And it's becoming more of an issue as they enter the workforce and with younger generations. And for me personally, on how I would want to continue developing these soft skills, I think it's continuing to practice the skills. So if there's opportunities to present my work in other situations, like doing that, taking those opportunities, but also trying to find learning opportunities, whether that's through training or through courses that help you develop these as well. And yeah, so I think the biggest thing on how to continue developing them is just to keep practicing and take opportunities to then continue developing skills you've already started.
All right, thank you. That's awesome. The next question for you, Hannah, is what soft skills do you find is lacking the most?
I think the biggest one that I've experienced personally and saw in my research is things like how to communicate properly and like teamwork and collaboration, because I think knowing how to communicate effectively is something that isn't talked a lot about in university and in school, because there is like a lack of potential. Like, here's the types of things you need to do to communicate effectively. Here's what to do. So I think communication is a big one. And then collaboration as well. I think university and other education is often very like individualized. It's kind of like doing individual research or individual essays, which isn't always a real life situation. You're most likely going to be working in teams, going to be working with people on similar ideas, but there's not that same opportunity always to develop those in university. And when you do work on group projects, it's often still very much people just kind of split it up and say, like, I'm going to do this part, you do that part, and then combine it. Less of really collaborating and working together to do the whole project. So I think communication and teamwork are the ones that I've seen that lack the most, but also what research says as well.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I really liked your point about teamwork and collaboration in university settings. That was very insightful. Question to you, Hannah, is do you believe that perhaps COVID may have had an impact on the lack of development of soft skills, as well as the opportunity to gain those skills? And could that be why the gap has increased recently?
I think that's definitely a potential like impact and potential reason for this. We think about like having to work virtually and having to be online for some part of your education. You're potentially losing the opportunity to develop communication skills or develop teamwork, because I know that there was during COVID a really focus on like trying to make sure you were doing projects that could be done individually in case of having to isolate or having to shut down for a couple of days or something like that. So students really lack the opportunity to develop skills in the classroom, but also like there was a lack of things like co-op. SignFX had to and stop doing like service learning. So students weren't able to do opportunities to develop those skills in situations such as a student internship or in a service learning placement, because those organizations had closed their like doors to that to prevent the spread of the infection. But it really, I think, prevented the development of soft skills, because those are so important, because they're real life situations and able to kind of apply them rather than just learning and then figuring it out later. So I think COVID definitely has had a potential impact on soft skills development for students. And I think we'll likely see that increase potentially with like once students who spent a lot of their time in high school or potentially in university during COVID, that you might see further skills gaps. But that would be a future research thing, I think. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for your question. Once again, if you have any questions for Hannah about her work or her research, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. And now ask the questions to Hannah. We have another question for you, Hannah. The question says, adaptability and flexibility are definitely like soft skills needed in the workplace, whether virtual or in person. In your research, how would those in university or new grad work on and improve these skills? So how would those in university or new grads work improve skills such as adaptability and flexibility, whether in person or virtual working?
I think those are definitely soft skills that, like, when I came up in my research, it was things that were kind of harder to develop because you definitely need to have them, but it's one of those things like, how do you really learn how to be adaptable? But I think it's takes a lot of like recognizing, like I do need to be flexible in how work can be done, and putting a concerted effort in, for example, in a team essay or in a group essay or assignment, like being more willing to be flexible in how you want things to be done and how you think things should be done, and offering opportunities for others to speak about what their opinions and perspectives are. Um, I think that would be one way that would be really important to develop like flexibility, because a lot of people do have like, here's how I want to do it, and here's how I want this to be done. And that is fine if you're doing that individually, but in a team setting, you have to be flexible and have to be willing to take uh, compromises from other members of your team. And then I think adapting is something that you have to kind of take along with almost like problem solving and critical thinking. So I think it's something you have to do kind of in the moment, and when something comes up, really put an effort to like, how can I adapt this so that it does work and I can succeed. So I think kind of just responding to situations in a way that lets you develop that. But also you could definitely like look at potentially like learning and like reading about these skills and like how they're important. So I think that's an important step too, is learning, why do I need to know this and what does this look like as well. So I think it's a matter of taking it upon yourself to potentially do a little bit of research and a little bit of reading before really jumping in to develop them as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for your response. Once again, if you have any more questions for Hannah, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, to ask her any questions. I have a question for you, Hannah. My question is, are there any things that you would change or add to the university experience to support soft skill development before the youth reach the workforce?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing, or like a couple things actually. So I think the first thing is really have some sort of opportunity for students to really like learn about what soft skills actually are and like what they do and why they're important, because I think the term like soft skills are like thrown at you all the time, but like you don't really learn like, what's that even mean? What is a soft skill? Why do I need a soft skill? And so starting with that, whether that's in like first year classes somehow, or if that's like another class. But also I think trying to integrate soft skill development into more classes, because I know like some programs obviously have that more integrated into them because it is a key part of like a future career. But like I found that in some of my classes, it was very much like an individual thing. So I think integrating soft skill development specifically around like teamwork and like communication to every class would be important. And then I think really trying to emphasize the importance of providing like real life opportunities to develop the skills. So whether that's through things like co-op opportunities or like service learning, or just like student internships or like volunteering, I think is really important as well, because having the opportunity to use those in a real life setting, I think is the most impactful, at least in my experience, and knowing how they actually work in a like real world experience is important.
Thank you for that. That was very insightful. Are there any more questions for Hannah? Okay, if there are no more questions, that will conclude our panel on youth engagement. Thank you all for joining us, and a big thank you to our amazing panelist, Hannah. You have so much knowledge to share with us, and I think I can speak for us all when I say we've learned a lot. For our audience, if you have enjoyed this panel, we have one more panel coming up as part of the 2023 Nova Scotia Career and Employment Student Symposium. Later today at 1:30 p.m., we have another panel on the theme of community-led development with some amazing panelists, and you don't want to miss it. Thank you once again to our panelists and to you all for attending. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.